following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. St. Louis Bazeball, past, present, future. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Al Blumpkin is not present tonight, but the man, the host, the author is here. Gene Hutmaker, how are you?
Hey, happy baseball season.
Isn't it great? Opening day?
Well, just great. Like I say, I can minimize my talking to my wife, and she's probably happy about it too.
At some levels, I bet she is. You have how long has it been? 40 some odd years you've been?
It'll be 50 this year.
Oh wow!
Third game of the World Series, 1968. Ray Washburn winning pitcher. Cardinals won 7-3.
Wow, you're the first generation of people who have been married for 50 years that don't have the dialect. Well, we were together when a long time ago. There's no accents anymore, no dialects, no Yiddish dialects, no Italian dialects. We're homogenized.
Yeah, well, she's from Mitley. 7 years old, she came over from Mitley.
Your wife?
Yeah.
She has no. I'm never having spoken to her. I'm guessing you would not know it in her dialect. Am I correct?
She's the 13th out of 14 kids, and the older ones have a little bit of a dialect, have a little bit of an accent. I was in the Army in Vietnam with her brother. That's how I happened to run into her.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
wow.
We lived about 5 miles apart, and I happened to go over there when we were on leave. We were in the same unit, and I saw her, and even though she doesn't like baseball.
Did you know each other before you went in?
No, I was friends with him because I was with 25 guys from 5 mile radius of my house, and we were both on leave at the same time. I went over to pick him up, and he wasn't ready. I went in the house, and I saw her, and I thought she had a better curve than Sandy Koufax.
All right. Love at first sight. Now, was it love at first sight for her?
She wasn't wearing glasses. She didn't wear her glasses till after we were married. She says, "Oh, my God, what did I do?"
You guys have it down. You have a good routine, don't you?
Pretty good.
Tell us, for those who don't know, your wife was gracious enough to type up the manuscript of the book that you wrote by hand entitled
Band in the Bronx, The Yankee Hater Memoirs, 1953 to 2005. It's a 5-star reviews on Amazon. You could get it there. It's also in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And I did get a letter from the former owner of the Texas Rangers, this guy named George Bush. And Bud Selig sent me a letter. So a lot of pretty good people have a copy of the book. Of course, George Steinbrenner never got a copy.
Well, a lot of notable people got.
Yeah, Brooks Robinson emailed me that he wasn't exactly a Yankee lover, but he's not exactly fond of him either, but he was enjoying the book.
And that's Mr. Bush.
That was Brooks Robinson.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, he wasn't a Yankee lover. So you two had a lot in common. And I wanted to ask you, because the book goes through 2005, and because time marches on like a mother, it's 2018, a lot of water's going under the bridge, and a lot of interesting stuff is going on in Yankee land to make a Yankee hater hate them even more, if that's possible. And I'm wondering if there's a chance you'll come out with a revised edition. I'm asking you now.
A sequel's always on my mind, of course. If I do so, I do risk a divorce.
Yet it's always on your mind.
Yeah, so it's on my mind.
So you're
a lot of people
having to reinvent the wheel of going through the thought process once again, and I'm sure sometimes, a couple of times a day, you start to think about if you're like anybody else. Life is what it is, but you wouldn't risk a divorce, would it really?
She makes good lasagna. I'd really hate to give that up.
Her Italian heritage.
Yeah, well, in fact, some of my students, I work security in a high school, and naturally everybody knows the school's famous author. Anyway, a few of the students are asking me who have read the book if I'm going to do a sequel. But it's always on my mind. Of course, me and I probably work like 10 hours a day a lot, 6 hours on my regular, and now I'm doing 3-4 hours of athletic security is my main, what I do extra. That's my hobby, doing sports for the high school. And,
but Gene, since the time you wrote the book, you will agree that technology has changed, and that you could now dictate the book at any time of day. You don't have to sit down with a pencil anymore.
Yeah, I know. But even when I wrote it, I wasn't versed on a computer. And when my wife was in high school back in the late 60s, she could type 100 words a minute. So that's why I had to type it. And the way my brain works, I had to sit there and write it longhand. And the funny thing was,
you're such a good orator, and you're so quick on your feet. Have you considered talking into a machine, a device?
No, not yet. It's far from my mind. And then we handle the granddaughter for 12 hours a day because my son's a dean of a college and his wife's a principal. So we handle the granddaughter for a long part of the day. So me and her get along. I deal with her a lot better than my wife does. So that's another thing that, like, when she gets older, and if I quit, I don't know when I'm going to stop working, if I ever am, but because I have such a good time there. But I'd probably start doing it. And I didn't have I'll bet
you don't even think of it as work. Just like me in this network, it's work in a sense, but it's a labor of love with you and with me here. And
well, I'm good with the kids.
You have to. And what do people do in retirement that don't have something to get up for? I wonder if they just die within. And statistically, it really holds true. They die in a very short time after retiring. They just kind of.
My position in the school is I am the security for the lunches. I do the lunches. I do 3 lunches. They're about a half hour long, each of them. But no one ever wants to do the lunches. But I do it because I talk sports with the guys. And the girls too.
Right.
And in fact, I'm a long-time coach, and I'm always trying to give them some tidbits on coaching, on what they're doing, and trying to encourage them and motivate them. We won 3 state titles in the past 6 years in football. Our girls softball was really good, and especially the baseball guys. They all know I coached like 500 games in my time, and and I just did a game yesterday too for the scrimmage we had. But
with all those years of amateur coaching, have you ever considered being a bird dog scout for any of the teams, or even get into scouting as a full-time thing?
No, that's a commitment. You got to go all over, and it's so hard for Jersey people to make to really make it because of the weather conditions and so forth. A couple of people ask me
just don't get to play enough games, do you?
Yeah, it's like like I say, we had a scrimmage the other day, and there was a bunch of Major League scouts checking out the school we were playing. Not any of our players. In fact, 3 years ago, though, we had Bill Robinson's grandson. Bill Robinson, who 20-something homers for the 79 Pirates. In fact, I was talking to his son at a lot of the games, seeing his son play.
Coach of the Mets, as a matter of fact, and a Philly.
Right. I think he there with Mookie Wilson play. Was he the first base coach at all?
I think he was, yes.
Well, he passed away, but I talked to his son, and naturally his grandson I talked to a lot because he went to pitch for he was like All-State, Group 5 All-State, Group 4 All-Stater, and he went to Northeastern to pitch. He also played, he batted for us too, but he went to Northeastern as a pitcher. And,
Boy, that makes me, and I'll bet you, on some level, you got to feel old if you're looking at grandsons of players that you followed in the big leagues who weren't rest in peace, Mr. Robinson. Well, he wasn't that much older than we are,
right.
if at all. So,
I think he had like 28-something homers for the 79 Pirates, I think it was.
Right.
He's in the book because I showed his grandson where he was in the book.
Oh, wow. So. That had to be a thrill. That was really cool. That absolutely cool. Make sure he gets a copy.
And we have his ball. He threw in the tournament game. He threw a no-hitter for us. Ty Robinson.
All right.
And
let's
other
make him our guy to follow. Is he sure to be? I'm sure. I'm convinced he's a good bet to be drafted.
Yeah, well, I didn't check him out see what he's doing at Northeastern, but like I say, our major guy in our high school was Mohamed Sanu, the receiver for the Falcons.
Oh, okay.
He played in the Super Bowl. He caught a pass in just before the Atlanta meltdown, and they got taken out of field goal range. He caught a pass to put him back into it, but there was holding on the play. But Sanu's a pretty good. He's a starter for the Falcons, and he's a pretty good player, and he was All-American at Rutgers. Now we have another player who's graduated this year, going to Penn State. He was regarded as the number one receiver in the nation, and he's already as big as Sanu. He's like 6'4", 220.
We're talking about Penn State, not State Penn.
No,
right?
State Penn where I almost went to college.
Oh, okay. Isn't that where a lot of the hierarchy from Penn State ended up at one time or another? And that's good.
And I just met. I'm getting my knee replaced, and so I'm in the doctor's office. And who comes in there? This one guy. He didn't work for me, but he worked in my area because he was a mailman, Vietnam vet, and everything. And he was the grandson. Now he's the son-in-law of Allie Clark, who played for the '47 Yankees World Series ring and the 1948 Cleveland Indians World Series ring. So I ran into him there, and I hadn't seen him in 15, 20 years. Mr. Buck's been out, and he was a carrier, and we started talking about his son has one of the World Series rings from Allie Clark.
Wow.
He was kind of a reserve type player, but I got a couple of his baseball cards from back then from when he played in the '50s. Allie Clark, and from South Amboy.
Would he make a good story? He'd make a good podcast guest.
But he comes from South Amboy, Allie Clark, and they also have the manager of the '93 Marlins, McKeon. Also, the other World Series manager of the Twins, Kelly. They're both from South Amboy, and also it's a small town, and also the O'Brien brothers, twins who played for the early '50s Pirates. And
one of the O'Brien guys was a big-time athlete in Seattle.
Yeah, both of them were. They were. There was I got this book about, and it has a story. When they played the Harlem Globetrotters, the Globetrotters were going around playing. They were playing real games, and the O'Brien brothers beat the Harlem Globetrotters with Goose Tatum and Marcus Haynes.
Whoa!
Whoa. That was just before Elgin Baylor.
That's some pretty stiff competition right there. And, they did at times play straight, and at times they lost playing straight. So that's a good example.
Yeah, there was a thing. I think Dane Clark, played Saperstein in the movie on the Globetrotters, and they had a classic battle with the Minneapolis Lakers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with Mikan and
the old George Mikan, Jim
Mickelson,
Pollard,
and
Slater Martin.
Yeah, they had a good team, and
they
had. I think the Lakers won more of them, but they in the movie they had the Globetrotters winning. I mean, Haynes and they were really good. Tatum and they were like legit players, but they were making more money then than they were. They were making more money playing with the Globetrotters than they would in the NBA because the NBA didn't pay anything.
I got to tell you a great Marcus Haynes story. When I'm a kid, I used to go down for autographs to the hotels where the visiting players stayed. And I went down to a hotel where the Celtics were staying, and we're just wandering the lobby and the gift shop and the little snack store, just waiting to see players and get them to sign something for us. And we're hanging around, and comes an announcement. Will Mr. Marcus Haynes pick up the guest courtesy phone? And we looked at each other, my buddy and I, and we realized there's another great ball player within, a few feet from here, possible autograph. That was a big thing as a kid growing up, and so the name came up. The Globies would come in and open up double headers for the Knicks, and basically they were as big a draw as anything going. That was some good basketball back in those days. Bet you attended.
Here's another interesting basketball story. As you saw earlier, my relationship with my wife. He never take me anywhere. We never go anywhere. Well, anyway, her brother, the one I was in Vietnam with, they lived in our town. Were
you saying that to her or her to you?
No, saying.
Oh, it's not. It's not her taking you places.
Yeah. She goes, we never go anywhere. We never do anything. So her brother was living.
Okay.
This is like 1974, 75. So they're living by us, and she goes to I used to go to Princeton home games. We live 5 miles from Princeton, and Princeton was really good then with Pete Carroll. Anyway, I go to all the games. So my brother-in-law and his wife were going to go. So naturally, my wife, they talked her into going, and she hates sports. So we go to Princeton, and we're over there, and we're watching the team and everything. And this guy comes by me. We got to get up. This guy was about 6'8", and he was the father. He was the father of the Princeton star, Bonds Hoffier, who was a 6'8" center who was really good. Princeton won the NIT in '75. But anyway, the father was 6'8", so they walk by and they go and sit. So I go to my brother-in-law, his wife, and my wife. I go, you see that guy over there? He was the first-round draft choice from Harvard in 1948, but he decided to become a lawyer instead of go to the NBA because the NBA was just starting then, because there was more money to be a lawyer. So he was a lawyer, so I pointed to him. Meanwhile, we had to get up and let him pass. It was him and a couple other people, and there was this woman with a kerchief over her head. So they passed, and they sat down there, and I pointed them out because of the father. The next day in the paper, it was said that was Barnes Hoffier's dad escorting Grace Kelly at the game.
Oh, wow.
So Princess Grace, now I tell my wife, I take you where royalty goes. He was escorting her around, showing her colleges for her son William. Or I think he ended up going to Amherst, but they were checking out Princeton at the time. And this happened. We had to get up and they go excuse us, and walk right by us.
But you didn't recognize her at the time.
No, she had a kerchief on, and and she was from 1975. She was a little bit older than when she did High Noon.
Right, unfortunately, and she was stunningly beautiful when we were kids.
But it was kind of ironic because I'm reading the paper. And well, what's going on? What's going on? I go, look at this. Great, that was Grace Kelly that went by us.
Incredible that she could just mix in. You put a kerchief over, and she was a princess at that time. Right.
They were looking for a college. Barnes Hoffier was a Philly lawyer, and she was from a famous Philly family.
Oh yeah.
And Hoffier was a
dad
big
was an attorney. Anyway, let's talk a little Cardinal baseball.
Yeah, disappointing game. You get 4 runs against Syndergaard. You got to win.
I'm a Met fan.
I don't hate the Mets. Back in '69, I was a window clerk in Newark then before I was in management. I was a window clerk in downtown Newark, a couple hundred customers a day, and everybody was commenting on how I looked like Tom Seaver. We got the same body build. The hair was the same way. So, you know how siblings are. So, my sister lived in town, and I was over there. I go, people tell me I look like Seaver. People look like Seaver. And you know how siblings are. Yeah, sure, you look like Seaver. 3 days later, her neighbor happened to mention to her, your brother reminds me of Tom Seaver.
Wow.
So
that's
and back in '69, I mean, when the Mets started in 1962, they were so bad that you had to root for them, especially if they weren't playing your team. I mean, they won 40 games, so they became like a secondary type team for people to root for. And then in '69, when people were saying how much I resemble Seaver and all of that, if it wasn't for the Cardinals, I'd be pulling for the Mets.
All right, nice. And I got to tell you, I was thinking about this the other day, that in the National League, if it isn't for the Mets, I'm pulling for the Cardinals this year. At least this year, in honor of our fallen comrade,
right,
Jerry Hollis, and I really want them to do well in his memory, and I want you to have a good year with the Cardinals.
A lot of people in general, they have a positive feeling about Cardinals.
Right. Well, part of it, I have to say, is the image of Stan. When you think of the Cardinals, you think of him and that birds on a bat emblem and those classy uniforms with the socks and what have you. That has a lot to do with it. They never change styles. They're not, and I'll tell you what, I have a picture of myself in front of the Stan Musial statue right in front of the ballpark. We visited doing a cross-country trip. We visited that stadium to see the Mets, and when David Cohn and Harrelson Harrelson was the manager, David Cohn was the pitcher, and I gotta say, this is a baseball show, and we're, teams notwithstanding, we're all a baseball family. Buddy Harrelson has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and he's handling it like the classy champ that he is. He's coming out. It's the early stages. He doesn't have to do that. He could just go away, so to speak. But he's coming out publicly, holding interviews, and he's doing it to identify the problem and in hopes that others get help, if not now, then in the future. As a Met fan, I love the guy.
Love that fight with Rose.
Yes, he did, and he was the underdog.
But he held himself pretty well in that, like being outweighed by 30, 40 pounds.
That's absolutely correct. He's a tough little guy. He's wiry, and he was solid as a shortstop, not only in '69, but he was still there in '73 when they didn't win it all, but they won a pennant. So, and another Met tragedy, too, in the last 2 weeks. First, the glider passes away. I think we talked about that at Charles. We might have talked about that last week. And this week, Rusty Staub, Daniel passes. And that's a great loss in baseball history.
Also a great humanitarian, too, with all of his charities. I ran into him a few times at a But I used to go to the BAT dinners in New York, and he was usually hosting them and even doing some of the chef work with him, I think.
Right. So,
him and
let me tell you where my Cardinal Connect is this year, Gene. I have a fantasy league where we are the Los Buckaroos. The Los Buckaroos, in search of a closer that will get some saves, picked up Leon, who I picked him up shortly before the Cardinals signed Greg Holland to greatly enrich their bullpen. No matter who gets the closing job, I would like it if it were Leon, but he makes everybody better down the line, and I think they added to their chances considerably with that signing. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, they definitely needed a closer. And the way I see baseball for the past few years, I mean, the Yankees were so dominant because they had Mariano. You have to have, dominated closers nowadays. And like you have to have someone with the psych. And he led the league in saves last year with the Colorado Rockies, which is probably kind of hard to do since the light air.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And he really saw the bottom drop out of the market. So I think he's got a chip on his shoulder in that way. If I'm not mistaken, he just signed a 1-year contract. Am I correct?
Yeah, and he did some all-star stuff. If you get more money for this, that, and the other thing.
Oh, yeah, he'll get. We're not throwing a charity for the guy. He will definitely get his bucks along the way, if he hasn't already, because they're all getting an incredibly inflated amount of money. There's and they know it, but then again, they are the people that make it up through a system that has been very watered down in the sense that there are 30 teams, but the talent isn't watered down because now you have different countries contributing to the talent pool. So there's much more competition. So these guys that are making the big bucks are paying the price, either getting college, which is a minor league system of its own. These kids going to college to play baseball, and/or minor league experience along the line. It's 6, 7, 8 years before they reach the majors, and with no guarantee along the way that they ever will before the big bucks start coming in, the really big bucks. So, like I say, we're not having any charities for the guy, but he expected more money. The market dried up. I think Boros sold out to next year's crop of free agents.
Yeah, he'll want to get even.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I'm sure that he saw that there's so many big names out there that were much more, that could put fannies in the seats as well, and there are a few players out there that can do that. They can put fannies in the seats and still contribute and give you some bang for the buck you spend on them on the field, as well as the gate attraction. And there are 3 or 4 guys out there. Bryce Harper is out there. Maybe you can...
Kershaw?
Oh, yes, Kershaw. Right. That, I think the Dodgers will eat him up.
And then Machado?
Yeah, wow. Those
I don't know what the Yankees are going to do.
Is Trout out there?
No, I don't think he's there yet. I think he has another year. And they're talking about the Phillies for him. If the Phillies ever do decent, because he loves the Phillies, because he grew up in South Jersey, close to Philly, in Millville. So he was a Phillies fan. Not that that's going to matter. I mean, I know all the stuff that he's accomplished, more than anything, he'd like to get a ring.
Is this Trout we're talking about?
Yeah, Mike Trout. He's from Millville, New Jersey, which is in South Jersey.
Which is so interesting because just a few moments ago, we were talking about how hard it is for players to get enough playing time as a kid. And he's in a cold weather climate as well. And there are other blatant exceptions with Hank Greenberg, Sandy Koufax coming at it, Joe Torre, his brother Frank, coming out of Eastern States, the newest member, the newest podcaster on my network, our network, I might add, is Gene, because you're a big part of it, is Skip Lockwood, who is in the Boston area.
Well, right now, too, they have showcases, too, now. Before, you just had your high school year, and that was pretty much it. But now, like you said before, like the technology and everything you have, they got showcases where you can see what they can do.
Right. Now, when your kids were coming up, did you have that at all? Was there some way that the scouts got to see them?
No, not really. Like my younger one, he was always hurt. In the senior year, he was All-State. But it was the Columbia coach and Johns Hopkins. We both went to a visit for both of them. Johns Hopkins in Baltimore and Columbia. Their coaches called us for a visit. But
which
that's
is closer to your
GPA.
home?
And that was because of GPA. It's really hard to get like smart kids because they have high academics. And he was like number 3 in the class, so they were interested in him. And he went to Columbia.
Which school is closer to your home?
Columbia's, I'm in Central Jersey, so Columbia's about around an hour ride, and Baltimore was about 220 miles. That's in Baltimore. But he wanted to go. He
enticed
wanted
you to go down there? I'm just curious because you've been. What was you curious about down there?
At that point, he wanted to be a doctor, and Johns Hopkins is a top school. Then he went to Columbia, and they told him he could make a lot more money going into finance from an Ivy League school, so he switched over to finance.
That's incredible.
But it all worked out. But like there was no showcases. It's what he did in high school. They checked the things. He batted over 400. He was a Group 4 All-Stater, and he was the all-area third baseman and all of that, and plus he had the grades.
Very cool, and he's the son that is a dean in Manhattan.
Right, and the Lehigh wanted him, Wesleyan, a lot of the brain schools were sending him letters. And he did have 3 academic scholarships to lesser academic colleges, but my deal with my sons was I will pay for the best academic school you can get into. So,
good point.
Which my wife took a fit and a half because our other son was going to Rutgers, which was pretty cheap since we're Jersey residents and it's a state college. And she thought all the prices were the same because she had no idea. I kind of took care of the education aspects of our sons. And my deal was with my sons. I go, you get into Ivy League, we're paying. You get into Duke, Stanford, one of them schools, we'll pay. I'm not going to pay for, say, Boston College over Rutgers. Because Rutgers is a pretty decent school.
Right. But you go first class on a.
Yeah. So if you're getting a 4.3, you're number 3 in a class. He goes, and the scholarship schools that send him academic scholarships. He goes, Dad, I'm not busting my butt in high school to go anywhere. I go, of course you're not. I go, don't worry. Me and my wife work, and we could, we could afford to send him to wherever he got in academically. But I wasn't going to pay to another college that was similar to Rutgers and pay a lot more.
Right.
So, but Columbia worked
out fine. And it worked out.
And he loves New York.
I can well imagine he's on top of the world.
I mean, he had dinner because he worked for Bank of America. He had dinner with Derek Jeter, Mariano, and Andy Pettit, and anytime there was a baseball function, he'd go.
All right.
So,
all right.
And And my sons, they don't hate the Cardinals either. They understand I hate the Yankees, but they don't hate. They'll root for the Cardinals.
They'll root for them in the National League over any other team?
No, they root for all New York teams, so they'll root for the Mets. They didn't care who won the 2000 World Series because the Yankees won in '98 and '99, and they said it's okay if the Mets win, because they root for the Mets also.
Well, I think when both teams in New York are doing well, just like when both teams in L.A., both teams in Chicago, etc., it's good for both teams. When Oakland and San Francisco are both on top of the world, it's good for baseball. It's good, keeps people coming out.
Well, New York, a lot of people say like a sport with New York, the Rangers and Knicks haven't, especially the Knicks haven't really done anything since Bradley and the Busher and them and Willis Reed. But it's good when they New York
ago.
Well, in New York at the time, well, we were growing up. New York had like 10 newspapers?
12
newspapers. I mean, the
12
Daily Mirror,
dailies.
I mean,
and they always had to have a scoop. They always had to have a different approach, different angle. It was very great as a kid growing up to be able to have access.
Who's your favorite writer?
My favorite writer for a while was Dick Young.
Yeah.
Until he became my most hated writer.
With he went against Seaver?
Yeah. Yeah, that was unfair. It was something he did to appease management so his own kid could get some sort of job. And it was just horrible. The whole mindset, his whole mindset of the way he could look at big business and the working person and not see that it wasn't right, that Seaver was a slave, a well-paid, but he was a slave. This was before free agency. And, even though you say, well, he's making so much money, this, that, and the other thing, well, guess what? Any player, not just Seaver, guess what? He could make the money, and he could, if he were a singer, he could make the money and sing in the venues that he wanted to sing. He shouldn't be deprived of that just because he's a ball player. And I think Dick Young set baseball back, and it certainly wasn't fair the way he painted the relationship between Tom Seaver and his wife and Nolan Ryan and his wife, and that was a bunch of lies, bunch of crap. But yes, Dick Young.
I remember the Cardinals with Steve Carlton, they had a contract dispute too, and they didn't like, and they traded him for Rick Wise.
Right.
Well, the Cardinals.
It wasn't just the contract; it was the idea of him pitting M. Donald Grunt against Tom Seaver the way he did. The press has a lot of power. Sometimes they use it properly. Sometimes they use it improperly. And in this case, the only reason I thought of it is because you mentioned favorite writers. In retrospect, looking back, because Leonard Coppett gave me the first interview I ever did in this kind of thing, and I learned so much from him, being his friend over the years. When he came out to California, he was definitely my favorite writer, of course. But now that I'm doing this podcast thing and relating to people like Hal Bach, who was the baseball writer for the Associated Press since for 43 some years, and talking to guys like that on a regular basis, I don't have any favorites. I'm living in a Jew boy fantasy league, baseball fantasy league every day of my life. It's unbelievable doing these shows.
Well, I contact Jerry Eisenberg. Remember Eisenberg from the Ledger?
Oh, very well.
Yeah, he's still doing. He's like still does the Super Bowls. He did it when it first began, the first Super Bowl. That was his big thing. I've been following him since I was a kid in the 1950s.
That's got to be nice. That he's been very prolific over the years. There's been a number of them. When I was really young, Red Smith wrote for the Herald Tribune. Mm-hmm. And when we were in like first, second, third grade, whatever, they would, in our elementary school, PS 148 in Jackson Heights, they would, if your mother would give you a dime a day or whatever it was, a dime a week, they would have the Herald Tribune delivered to your seat in class. So, and I think you had the choice of the Tribune or the Times, and I took the Tribune because of Red Smith, who spun a beautiful yarn. I'll ask you, who did you read, what early sports books did you read as a kid?
Well, I still have my first book report, the Bob Feller strikeout story. In fact, I still got the book that I used for fifth grade. In the first year we had to do book reports, and naturally,
with the circle of Bob and his face on the cover, right?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. So I
know that book. My uncle, rest in peace, Harold Niss, looked exactly like Bob Feller, and that book sat in my grandparents' house, and I read that book. He brought up on a farm, joined the Navy, all this stuff. Great book. Great.
And then the Gas House Gang I read naturally, like Cardinals.
Right.
And then the other book I have is My Greatest Day in Baseball. My father had it in his drawer where he used to, at the desk where he did all the checks and everything. And he had the baseball book in there, and it was My Greatest Day in Baseball, and it was made like in 1946, even before the color barrier. And so all the games were from, like Sam Musial wasn't even in there because he was so young. It was all the guys of Ty Cobb and Ed Walsh and George Sisler. My Greatest Day. That's why I learned so much about the history of the game at a young age. In fact, I still got that book. It's all falling apart and everything. And but I read that probably.
This is a great time of year. Which magazines, when you were a kid, did you look forward to coming out?
Well, Sports Illustrated.
You didn't look forward to coming out. You looked forward to the magazines coming out. Just wanted to get things.
Yeah, Sports Illustrated when it first started, with the Eddie Matthews on the cover.
Right.
And the 1953 season was, he had 47 homers, and was he going to challenge Ruth and all that kind of stuff? And he was a big hero in 1953, and they put him on the cover of the first Sports Illustrated magazine. But the only thing I didn't care for about Sports Illustrated, they had so much stuff about golf, tennis, yachting, rowing, stuff like that, where I preferred Sport magazine. And with Sport magazine, I used to have a scrapbook and cut out the color pictures of baseball players and put them in a scrapbook. So I always got Sport magazine, which came out once a month, whereas Sports Illustrated was once a week. And then every once in a while, Life or Look would have a baseball thing in there,
You know, Sport had these great color pictures of Warren Spahn and Sandy.
Right. I put them on my scrapbook.
Yeah, I'd put them on my wall. I'd Scotch tape them. I mean, it was just them's were the days.
There was no color TV.
That's right. And even, I'll tell you what about Sports Illustrated. They got some indoor hockey and basketball pictures that were so great in the garden of Gump Worsley and these guys that Sports Illustrated had great color pictures in the 50s as well, 50s and 60s. Yeah, there were no color TVs, so you'd see these guys
in color. I mean, it's baseball cards and the magazines.
Right. We were lucky because we were in the metropolitan area.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they won every year. The Giants, Dodgers, and Yankees, they won every year, and the Knicks were decent then. I mean, like I remember, like Willie Knowles and Kenny Sears, and
Well, they always lacked for a center until they turned it around, getting Bellamy, and then packaging him for DeBusschere, and they got Reed and those guys. But for a long time, they were hurting for centers. The Charlie Tyree, Ray Felix days. I mean, Knowles and Sears were terrific, but they weren't exactly bulky, and they'd be beaten. I mean, just rebounds were terrible. Guerin was terrific. Carl Braun was fun to watch.
The set shot.
That's it, right? Two-handed.
And Dolph Schayes had a two-handed shot too, from deep.
Yes, he did. And Dolph Schayes would run down the court, and he'd put his fist in the air. And I used to love to watch him do that. Syracuse was terrific. They had Bradley and Schayes and Al Bianchi and Costello.
Ed Conlon.
Ed Conlon, absolutely. And I think we might have even mentioned him before. I think Ed Conlon played with the Warriors for a year or two as well.
Okay. But I was a big Iverson fan.
I was too. He was a camp instructor of mine. He'd come up twice a year to Kittatinny Camp. He'd spend weekends with us, giving us basketball clinics, hanging with us. He was a regular guy. He was just, it was very cool. Paul Iverson. I'll give you some trivia. Do you remember he had this, if you're a Paul Iverson fan, you do, he had this straightaway jump shot. It was like a slingshot, very low trajectory.
Right.
He played...
He'd linger in the air sort of, too. Somehow he'd sort of like linger in the air, somehow. It seemed
right.
He seemed like to linger in the air.
Absolutely. And that slingshot shot was developed because the gym, I think it was at a church, had a very low ceiling. And he had to develop that to keep from hitting, a regular-sized arc would hit the ceiling. So he developed that shot. And he was one of those, when the Warriors went out west from Philadelphia, he didn't go with them. He chose to retire from the NBA and play in the Eastern League on weekends, and just it was like a semi-pro league, and that's how he faded into the sunset. But
I think them guys you said they were regular guys. I think they had to be because they had to work in the off season.
Right. As an example, Iverson was coming up to be a camp instructor, and he was being paid. I mean, that was they were paying him for his time, and yeah. And in all these guys, baseball players, basketball players, they had to work. I can remember Yogi Berra and Phil Rizzuto working in a
men's store in Newark.
Men's store, right? And you see pictures of that in the magazines. What are these guys doing in the off season? A lot of them worked. Kyle Rote worked. Frank Gifford worked. They had cushy jobs working in sales for their names. They'd go into a business. Hi, I'm Kyle Rote.
I don't know how much Yogi knows about style, though.
No, I don't.
I imagine Phil Rizzuto was probably a little more stylish, but
yeah, Yogi may not have been thinking of style, but can you imagine going into you'd buy a suit and there's Yogi and Phil Rizzuto? when I was a kid, growing up in Jackson Heights, about 3 blocks from where I live, on Astoria Boulevard, or I think it was down as far as Astoria, one winter that I remember, Carl Furillo either owned the store or worked as a clerk. I think he owned the grocery store for a while, about 3 blocks. And I can have a vivid memory of being a little kid and seeing Carl Furillo in this with a white apron. You know, one of those old-fashioned grocery store clerk aprons. So that they worked absolutely. And it was just a more humane. They were with the fans. And they could identify with the fans. So it made following them much more fun. You're following a millionaire today or billionaire today is a big difference.
Yeah, well, I was riding on a train. My first game I ever went to. For some reason, I was on a train with Mizell, Dick Sisler, who hit the homer against the Dodgers, and he was a Cardinal coach then. And Dick Anderson was, I think, a coach with the Cardinals. So we're talking on, I got a Cardinal hat on, I got a Stand-Up Man button on, and they were, you're not a Cardinal fan, are you? They were like, and I was 8 years old. They were, and for about 3-4 stops, we just talked.
Yeah, very cool.
Now they'd be in an Uber car or whatever, or a limousine.
That's right. Nobody would be driving. They'd be all alone. It would just be going automatic. And they go home from the game to gated communities, and they don't carry currency, and they're not out there. And
well, I think George Case said his father, when he sponsored for the cereals, they got a year's supply of Wheaties.
Right.
With their payment.
Right.
So he grew up eating cereal, but that's what they did in them days. They didn't the amount of money that they paid. These basketball Nike guys and the baseball cleats guys, what they get for Nike and Adidas and whoever else, the money they make is tremendous.
Oh, the money they make in college is tremendous from these shoe contracts, as is witnessed by the scandals that are going on in college.
Personally, a capitalistic way would be the kid should be able to make all the money he can get from these shoe companies if they're if you're going to Duke and you're a sophomore. I think if Adidas comes, hey, we want to give you a couple $100,000 to sponsor our sneakers. I think the kid should be able to make it as the American way, but the NCAA says no.
Well, amateur athletics is hypocritical. The expression student athlete is almost a joke. The one and out program that they have going. Do you remember seeing the same teams come back year after year to the NITs?
Yeah, I think that hurt. I think that really hurt the. I used to follow college basketball like I followed baseball, and the guys were there for 4 years. It was like.
Yeah, you build up a team, and these guys play under the rim teamwork. That's what we used to call college basketball, as opposed to the jumping jacks and what have you. There was an appeal to weaving. Remember they'd weave, pass the ball around, look for the open man, a sense of where you are. All that went out the window with one and out, because how can you develop a team chemistry when it's all revolving around one guy
in 1 year?
Really doesn't. Not only does he never attend a class in his first year, because by the time they put him on probation, he's gone.
He's gone. Well, I was good buddies.
His teammates, and he never learns his teammates' names.
But I was a good buddy of because I take care of the visitors. Carl Anthony Towns from the Timberwolves, he just scored 56 points instead of Timberwolves record the other day. Anyway, 8 times he played in our school, and I take care of the visitors, so I got to know him a little bit. And just after the game, just bull throwing around, waiting for the team bus to take him back. He was saying how much he hated to have to go to Kentucky for the year. He wanted to go right to the NBA, and I don't play. He had the talent too. To go right to the NBA, but he had to go for a year at Kentucky.
And was he over 18 at this point?
Well, I think so, yeah.
Well, then somewhere down the line, somebody's going to come to these NBA teams and these college teams. They're going to say, hey, you got to set something up for these kids to be able to compete and play. Because just to go to college for college's sake makes it semi-pro. And then the colleges will say, well, that's what builds the libraries. These guys coming in, and they're one and out.
Well, we were talking about the scandals how about the scandals of '61? I saw Seton Hall play. They had Artie Hicks and Hank Gunther were the two stars. And that year they beat Cincinnati with Paul Hogan. They beat Cincinnati. And they beat Providence, the NIT winner. So they beat the NIT winner that year, and they beat the NCAA winner that year. I think they were like 16-7 or something. But they were. Was
Lenny Wilkins with Providence or Jack Egan? Was it?
No, Thompson was. John Thompson was the center.
Oh, okay. With Providence.
Egan and Wilkins were gone. I think John Thompson was their center. But they beat in the Holiday Festival. Remember they had the fifth place game, so they finished 2-1 in that one. And in the consolation game, they beat Providence, and then during the year at the Garden, they beat Cincinnati, Cincinnati was NCAA, and Providence won the NIT. That's how good Hicks and Gunther were, but they were throwing games.
You just brought back a memory. The consolation game. It was a doubleheader, and in the first game, the guys that lost on both brackets played each other, and watching that game was kind of sort of really made me feel bad for these kids at that time, because even if they won that game, they were still a third place finisher.
Yeah, but the kids themselves were seeing, and if they weren't from the area, seeing New York.
Oh yeah, and playing at the Garden, how cool was that? Just in those days, there's the mecca of basketball, wherever you're from. And remember getting in for 75 cents and going up and sitting in the balcony. That was pretty cool too.
Yeah, you can move around a little bit, like the consolation game. You can move around, and because they weren't there for the regular game yet.
That's right. You could sit almost where you want to sit. I was lucky because my buddy growing up was my co-host now on the Met show, Marty Rose, one of my co-hosts. And Marty and I lived next door, over in the next building. We were both in apartment 201, him one building down in our co-op. Marty Rose's uncle worked as a sports writer. He was Murray Rose. May he rest in peace. Murray was a sports writer for the Associated Press. His dad worked for the Associated Press, and Murray would get us tickets to every game. Because these teams were papering the floor. They'd give out tickets to sports writers, and they'd give them out to their friends and what have you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it was terrific. We get seats, incredible seats, 2-3 rows back, and what have you. We were blessed in every sport. Roller derby during the winter, Jets games when they weren't even the Jets, they were the Titans playing in the Polo Grounds.
With Harry Wismer?
Harry Wismer, yes, absolutely. So we're lucky to grow up back there, weather notwithstanding.
Before sports, the Garden had Gene Autry and Roy Rogers rodeo.
I don't remember that, but I do remember the circus on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And sometimes you go into the garden for a basketball game, and it would smell of the horses and the elephants. So
yeah, we used to go to the circus there. I went with the Girl Scouts. My mother was one of these den mothers, so
right.
my father was working. So my sister was 2 years older, and I used to go with my mother and the Girl Scouts to these circus things that the Girl Scouts had.
Oh wow!
Because she couldn't leave me alone, and she didn't want to have a babysitter, so she took me too. So I was able to go to the circus.
Were you lucky enough to get to see the freak show at the circus, which is no longer? First of all, it's politically incorrect now. They don't no longer have freak shows. They've divided those into respective parties, political parties.
No.
But in those
the bearded lady and the
right,
all kinds of stuff like that.
All kinds of stuff that
I remember the fat woman.
From where? Oh, you mean
the fat woman was like probably 400 pounds or whatever, and they had the midgets and stuff like that.
Yeah, and now they're just amateurs in today's day and age. You see things on television where people are alive and they can't get out of their room. They'd have to break down the wall, and you'd think to yourself, how do people of normal size ever get a heart attack? And these people, their hearts keep beating, they're 800 pounds and what have you. So, one time about the circus is a story I tell my granddaughter, but she loves animals and everything. At the circus, I don't know, they used to sell a little box with a chameleon in it, the little lizards. Right.
So going home on the bus, what am I, 7 years old or whatever, I opened it just a little bit, not realizing how they can slither. It slithered out. We didn't ever tell the bus driver nothing, so he had a chameleon running around on his bus.
Right. Memories of the past.
It's like,
Hey, Gene, this is fun. I enjoy chatting with you on Fridays.
Yeah, we'll have more results by next week. You too, and we'll have more results next week about the season.
We'll be into it by then, and we'll get a good analyzation, and
I think Trout was 0 for 6 to start. Everybody's trying to say,
as we talked about last week, almost in it's almost like we were Nostradamus. We said if that was going to be their weakness, the bullpen with Gregerson being hurt and all that, they need help. They solved it, and
it'll be stronger when he comes back.
Absolutely, because it goes all the way, it goes all the way down, and the way bullpens are being used early on in the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th inning, you're going to need guys for every inning. And
it's going to be hard to overtake the Cubs, but they want to stay ahead of Milwaukee in order to get the playoff spot.
Possible wild card.
Wild card, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they can beat out the Cubs too, but
when the Mets aren't playing, I'm rooting for them. They have a piece of my heart because of Jerry. Rest in peace, my friend. I hope to see you.
Maybe he could pull some strings where he's at.
You know what? It may happen.
It can happen.
It certainly can. I'm thinking along the Tinkerbell line.
Yes.
Lines. If everybody just believe or all that. But the older I get, I don't know what it is. You don't know what it is.
Nope.
So you just got to go day to day, and
I keep an open mind toward it.
Absolutely. But it's funny. You don't keep an open mind towards everything, Gene. Keep an open mind.
I don't know about that.
No. Okay.
Some people would agree with you.
An open mind about thinking that you may not be keeping an open mind. Is that possible?
No, I think I keep an open mind, but I'm pretty steadfast in a lot of my positions, unless you can show me why.
Well, I will over these next couple of months, years, or decades. I'll attempt to do that, Gene.
I feel that I will listen, but I usually I'm usually steadfast in my position, and but
I'll feel good about perhaps giving you something to think about. You don't have to have my opinion.
I try and be objective.
Show more and more interesting, Gene, is our differences.
Right.
And I'll try to bring that out in us.
Okay, very good.
Good, Gene. Thanks. It was fun.
Okay.
Good. Happy Friday to you.
Yeah, have a great holiday.
And, of course, happy Pesach and Easter, or Easter and Pesach, depending on which way you're talking.
I'm looking forward to chocolate bunny time.
Okay. Be well, my friend. And if you're listening out there, I hope you enjoyed it. It's Gene Hutmaker's St. Louis Cardinals. Adios, everybody.
Good night.